The twin suns of Xyrus blazed high above the crimson dunes of the shattered wastes, casting long, accusing shadows over the wreckage of war. Smoke curled from the shattered hulls of skiffs and walkers, mixing with the dust kicked up by retreating armies. Amid the groans of dying machines and the distant cries of scavenger birds, a lone figure trudged through the carnage, boots sinking slightly into the blood-damp sand. His name was Jorik Vale, a human mercenary, broad-shouldered and weary-eyed, with a face that had seen too many nameless battles and lost too many friends whose names he still remembered. His armor was scuffed, his plasma rifle slung over one shoulder, and his heart heavier than his pack. He hadn't signed up for this war between the Xiran Dominion and the Velnari Confederacy. He'd only come to pay off a debt to a man long turned to ash. But fate, as it often did, had other plans. It was the glint of purple beneath scorched silk that caught his eye. A hand, slender and trembling, half buried beneath the collapsed flank of a war beast. Jorik dropped to one knee, brushing away ash and sand until he uncovered her. She was unlike any soldier he'd seen. Tall even in repose, skin the color of twilight amethyst, hair like spun starlight cascading in wild tangles over her shoulders. Delicate ridges traced her jawline, and her long lashes fluttered as if fighting to return to the waking world. Her armor, once regal, now shattered, bore the sigil of the Velnari royal house. One of the Dominion scouts had screamed, "Empress's spawn!" before Jorik put a bolt through his chest. Now he understood why. He checked her pulse, faint, but there. A deep puncture in her side leaked iridescent blood that shimmered like oil on water. He cursed under his breath. No medkit would handle alien physiology well, but he had plasma cauterizers, stim tabs, and a stubborn refusal to let someone die on his watch. Working quickly, he sealed the wound, packed it with synth gauze, and wrapped her in the only thing clean he had left. His own thermal blanket. She moaned softly, her white brows knitting together, and for a heartbeat, Jorik thought she might speak. But she only shivered, her fingers curling weakly around the edge of the fabric. For 3 days he carried her across the wastes, rationing water, fending off drone patrols, and whispering nonsense to keep her mind tethered. Old songs from Earth, tall tales of asteroid bartenders, even the name of his childhood dog, Biscuit. Yes, really? She never answered, but sometimes, when he thought she slept, her lips would twitch, almost a smile or maybe just pain playing tricks. Then came the storm. Not sand, not wind, but a shimmering wall of energy, the royal cloaking barrier. He'd heard rumors. The Velnari palace floated atop the great dune, hidden from sensors and sight. He'd never believed it, until the dune before him rippled like liquid glass and parted, revealing a spire of obsidian and pearl rising into the sky. Guards in iridescent armor descended on hover discs, pulse lances leveled. Jorik dropped to his knees, raising empty hands, the princess cradled protectively against his chest. "I brought her back," he said, voice raw. "She's alive." Laughter followed, cold, disbelieving. "The Princess Vela perished in the Battle of Dustfall," one officer sneered. "Her body was recovered. Her funeral rites were sung beneath 3 moons. Jorik didn't flinch. "Then dig up the coffin, because this is her. And if you shoot me before she wakes, you'll regret it more than I will." A hush fell. Then, from the highest balcony of the palace, a figure emerged, tall, regal, eyes blazing with violet fire. Empress Solara, Vela's mother, known across the galaxy for her merciless justice and sharper tongue. She descended in a floating palanquin woven with living vines and humming with ancient tech. Up close, her resemblance to the girl in Jorik's arms was undeniable. Same sharp cheekbones, same unnerving stillness beneath stormy emotion. She knelt, ignoring courtiers' gasps, and touched Vela's forehead. A low hum filled the air as biosignature scanners flared to life around her crown. The Empress's breath hitched. "It is her," she whispered. Then, louder, voice cracking like thunder, "She lives!" Chaos erupted. Healers rushed forward, but Jorik refused to let go until they promised no restraints. No sedation beyond what was needed. Only when Vela's eyelids fluttered open, revealing eyes the color of molten opal, and she whispered a single word, "Jorik." Did he finally surrender her to their care? He expected thanks, a reward, maybe a swift exit before politics swallowed him whole. Instead, he was led, not to a guest chamber, but to the obsidian court, where ministers and generals stood in stunned silence. The Empress sat upon her throne of fused meteorite and bone, Vela resting on a divan beside her. Wrapped in silks, her wound sealed with glowing biogel. She looked fragile, but her gaze held steel. "You are Jorik Vale," the Empress said, not as a question but a verdict. "Yes, your radiance," he replied, bowing slightly, not out of fear but respect. He'd seen enough rulers to know the difference between power and cruelty. "You carried my daughter through hell," she continued, voice softer now. "You spoke to her when she couldn't speak back. You shielded her from drones and dehydration and despair. Tell me, human, why?" Jorik glanced at Vela. She watched him intently, those opal eyes unreadable. "Because no one deserves to die alone," he said simply. "Especially not someone who fought like she did." A murmur rippled through the court. Vela sat up slowly, wincing but resolute. "He's telling the truth," she said, voice stronger than expected. "I remember his voice, like gravel and warmth. He called me princess once, then laughed and said, 'No, that's dumb, you're Vela.'" She looked at him, and for the first time, the ghost of a real smile touched her lips. "I liked that." The Empress studied him for a long moment. Then she did something no one expected. She laughed. Not politely, but a deep, rolling sound that filled the chamber. "You're either the bravest fool in the galaxy," she said, "or the gods themselves sent you." She stood, sweeping her robes aside. "Jorik Vale, you will remain in the palace. Not as a prisoner, not as a guest, but as Vela's sworn protector until she fully recovers." Jorik opened his mouth to protest. He was a soldier, not a nursemaid. But Vela spoke first. "Mother," she said, "he doesn't even know our customs. He doesn't know that in our culture, the one who carries a royal through death's shadow becomes bound to them by blood oath, by choice, or by fate." Jorik blinked. "Wait, what?" The Empress's eyes gleamed. "Indeed, according to the law of ashes and dawn, should a commoner return a royal from the brink of death, they are granted one of three honors: land, title, or kinship. Kinship, Jorik echoed, stomach dropping. Vela met his gaze. "It means," she said carefully, "that you could ask for my hand in marriage, and by our law I could not refuse, not if I wished to honor the debt of life." Silence. Jorik stared. The courtiers gaped. A minister dropped his data slate with a clatter. Then, slowly, Jorik rubbed his temples. "So let me get this straight," he said deadpan. "I dragged your half-dead daughter across a radioactive desert, saved her from buzzards, rations, and my terrible cooking. And now I'm being told I have to marry her?" Vela's eyes narrowed. "You say that like it's a punishment." "I didn't say that," he said quickly, holding up his hands. "I just look. I'm human. You're purple. And glowing a little. And probably allergic to coffee." "I've tasted coffee," she shot back. "It's bitter, chaotic, and oddly addictive. Like you." He opened his mouth. Closed it. "Okay, fair." The Empress watched them, arms crossed, a smirk playing on her lips. She'd seen her daughter spar with warlords, negotiate treaties that rewrote star maps, and stare down assassins without blinking. But never had she seen Vela blush. Yet there it was, a soft lavender flush spreading across her cheeks. "You don't have to decide now," the Empress said gently. "But you will stay, and you will train with our guard, and you will attend the reunion feast tonight, where the entire court will see that my daughter lives, and that her life was returned by the hands of a human." That night, the palace courtyard bloomed with floating lanterns and holographic vines. Musicians played chimes that sang in harmonic frequencies, and tables groaned under dishes that shimmered, steamed, or floated gently above their plates. Jorik, scrubbed clean and dressed in a borrowed tunic of deep indigo, felt wildly out of place, until Vela appeared beside him, dressed in robes of silver and violet, her white hair braided with tiny bioluminescent beads that pulsed with her heartbeat. "You clean up nicely," she said. "So do you," he replied. "Though I missed the blood and ash look. It had character." She laughed. A bright, clear sound that turned heads across the courtyard. "You're impossible. And yet here you are," he said, offering his arm. She took it without hesitation. As they walked, whispers followed them. The human who defied death. He carried her like she was made of starlight. Is it true he sang to her? Vela squeezed his arm, her voice low. "They think you're a hero. I'm just a guy with a backpack and too much conscience," he muttered. "No," she said, stopping him beneath a canopy of flowering sky vines. "You're the man who saw me. Not the princess, not the heir, but just Vela. And you didn't leave." He looked into her eyes, and for the first time the exhaustion, the cynicism, the weight of 1,000 battles. It all lifted, just a little. I couldn't, he admitted. Not when you were fighting so hard to come back. Later, during the ceremonial toast, Lord Tavik, a hawk-nosed general with a grudge against humans, rose and clinked his goblet. To Princess Vela's return, he said, voice dripping with false sweetness, and to the human who found her. Though one wonders how convenient it is that he appeared just after the Dominion declared her dead. Perhaps he works for them? A spy? Returning their prize to sow discord. The merriment died. Jorik tensed. But before he could speak, Vela stood. Lord Tavik, she said coolly. If he were a spy, he would have left me to die, or sold my body to the highest bidder. She stepped forward, her voice carrying across the silent courtyard. Instead, he gave me his last canteen. He walked barefoot over glass shards to keep from jostling my wound. And when I dreamed of drowning in darkness, his voice was the rope that pulled me back. If that is treachery, then I pray the galaxy drowns in it. A roar of approval erupted. Even the Empress nodded, pride shining in her eyes. After the feast, Jorik found himself on a balcony overlooking the endless dunes, the twin moons painting the sands in silver and rose. Footsteps approached. Vela joined him, holding 2 cups of steaming amber liquid. Not coffee, she said, handing him one. It's moonroot tea, good for nightmares. He took it. Their fingers brushed. Neither pulled away. I've never been to Earth, she said softly. Is it green? Mostly, he said. Too much rain. Too many trees. But the sunsets, they're like fire on water. I'd like to see one, she said. He looked at her, really looked. Not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as a woman who'd faced death and chosen to live. I'd like to show you, he said. She turned to him, eyes wide. You mean you're considering it? The kinship. He sighed, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. I don't know your laws. I don't know your world. But I do know this. When I thought you might die in my arms, I felt like I'd lost something I never knew I had. He met her gaze. So yeah, I'm considering it. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for his hand, her touch cool but sure. Don't be afraid, she whispered. The same words he'd said to her in the desert, when fever had seized her. Whatever happens next, we face it together. Below them, the palace hummed with life. Above, the stars blazed, cold, distant, infinite. But on that balcony, between a human warrior and a purple-skinned princess with hair like moonlight, something warmer began to grow. Not just gratitude, not just duty, but the fragile, stubborn seed of something that might, in time, bloom into love. And in the days that followed, Jorik trained with the royal guard, clumsy at first with their energy whips and gravity blades, but quick to learn. Vela walked beside him, her strength returning with every sunrise. They sparred in the morning gardens, debated galactic politics over spiced fruit, and once, just once, laughed so hard over a misfired hovercrate that they collapsed in a heap on the marble floor, breathless and grinning. The Empire believed the princess was dead, but Jorik Vale had brought her back, and in doing so had unknowingly brought himself to the beginning of a story far greater than war, of 2 worlds, 2 hearts, and the quiet courage it takes to choose each other, again and again, beneath alien skies. Weeks passed, and the palace settled into a rhythm that felt almost ordinary, though Jorik knew better than to trust calm in a place built on secrets. Vela's recovery was swift, her movements regaining their lethal grace as she resumed her duties as heir to the Velnari throne. Yet something had shifted between them. Their walks through the sky gardens grew longer, their silences deeper, charged with words they hadn't yet dared to speak. He taught her Earth slang, that's wild, not feral, your highness. And she showed him how to weave starlight into temporary tattoos that glowed for hours. He found himself smiling more. She found herself lingering after council meetings just to hear his voice. But peace in the Velnari Empire was a fragile thing, like glass spun from comet tails. The first twist came on the eve of the Unity Concord, a treaty summit meant to formally end the war with the Ziran Dominion. Jorik was polishing his borrowed pulse blade in the barracks when a sealed data capsule arrived, stamped with Dominion insignia. He didn't recognize the sender, but the message inside made his blood run cold. We know what you carry. The princess isn't who you think. Retrieve her before the Concord, or we reveal the truth, and burn every human colony in the Outer Rim. No signature. No demands beyond silence. just a threat wrapped in venom. Jorik showed it to Vela that night in the moonlit observatory. She read it twice, her face unreadable, then crushed the capsule in her palm until it dissolved into silver dust. "They're lying," she said. "It's a ploy to destabilize the treaty." "Maybe," Jorik said, uneasy. "But why target me? Why not send it to your mother?" Her silence answered for her. Then came the second twist, one that struck not from outside, but from within. During a routine weapons drill, one of Vela's closest aides, Commander Lyra, a sharp-eyed warrior with skin like polished obsidian and loyalty unquestioned, confronted Jorik in the armory. "You've charmed her," Lyra hissed, blocking his path. "But you don't know what you're walking into. Vela isn't just the Empress's daughter, Jorik. She's a clone." Jorik froze. "What?" "Crafted during the Blood Plague, when the royal line was nearly wiped out." Lyra continued, voice low and urgent. "The real Vela died as an infant. This one. She's a genetic echo, grown in a cradle of starlight and sorrow. The Empress raised her as her own out of grief and necessity. No one outside the inner circle knows, not even Vela herself, until recently." Jorik's mind reeled. "She doesn't know she's?" "She found out 3 cycles ago," Lyra cut in, "after decrypting her mother's private archives. She's been living with the truth ever since. That's why she threw herself into the war, why she was on the front lines. She thought if she died a hero, her life would matter, even if it wasn't real." Lyra's eyes softened. "And then you pulled her from the ashes, gave her a reason to live as herself. Not a memory, not a replacement, but Vela." Jorik found her that evening on the western spire, staring into the twin suns as they bled into the horizon. He didn't mention the clone. Not yet. Instead, he sat beside her and said, "I got another message. From the Dominion." She tensed. "What did it say?" "That you're not who I think you are." He turned to her. "But I don't care who they say you are. I care who you are to me." Tears welled in her opal eyes, something he'd never seen before. "What if I'm not even real?" she whispered. He took her hand, rough human fingers curling around her cool, slender ones. "Real isn't about where you come from. It's about what you choose. And you chose to stand, to fight, to laugh at my stupid jokes. That's more real than blood or code." She leaned her head on his shoulder, silent for a long time. Then, quietly, "I remember the cradle. Not clearly, just warmth and singing, and a voice saying, 'You are mine.' I always thought it was my mother. But now I wonder, was it a machine? A dream?" "You're more than your origin," Jorik said. "You're the woman who refused to let fear rule her. The one who stood up to Tavik in front of the whole court. The one who shares her tea even when she's tired." He squeezed her hand. "That's who you are. And that's who I—" He stopped himself. She looked up. "Who you what?" He almost said it, almost told her. But fate, cruel and theatrical, chose that moment to strike. Alarms blared across the palace. A deep, throbbing wail that meant breach. Not from the sky, not from the wastes, but from below. The undercrypts, sealed chambers beneath the palace where ancient Velnari tech slept, had been opened, and from them poured figures clad in black armor, faces hidden behind masks shaped like scorpion skulls. The Void Reapers, a splinter faction once thought extinct, made up of zealots who believed the royal bloodline had been corrupted by off-world impurity. And now, apparently, by clones. "They've come for me," Vela said, drawing her energy whip with a crackle of violet light. "No," Jorik said, grabbing his plasma rifle. "They've come for both of us." What followed was chaos. The Reapers moved like shadows, their weapons disrupting gravity fields, sending guards floating helplessly into walls. Jorik fought with desperate precision, rolling under energy blasts, using palace pillars for cover, shouting warnings to fleeing courtiers. Vela was a storm of speed and fury, her whip slicing through armor like silk, but they were outnumbered. In the throne room, the Empress stood defiant, flanked by her elite guard. But when the Reaper leader stepped forward, taller than the rest, voice distorted by a modulator, he didn't attack. He knelt. "Your radiance," the figure said. "We do not seek your death. We seek purification. The false heir must be unmade. Her bond with the human taints the throne." Empress Solara's eyes blazed. "She is my daughter. By law, by heart, by starfire. That is enough." "It is not," the Reaper hissed. Then, with a flick of his wrist, he activated a device on his belt. The floor beneath Vela and Jorik shimmered and vanished. They fell not into darkness, but into memory. A neural vault. The Reapers hadn't just broken in, they'd triggered the palace's ancestral archive, a psychic repository that replayed pivotal moments in royal history. And now Jorik and Vela were trapped inside a looping echo of Vela's earliest days. A sterile cradle chamber, a weeping empress, a scientist whispering, "The genome is stable. She will be perfect." Vela cried out, clutching her head. "Make it stop!" But Jorik did something unexpected. He stepped toward the memory empress, translucent, unaware, and placed a hand on her shoulder. "She is perfect," he said aloud, his voice cutting through the illusion. "Not because of her genes, because she chose kindness over fear." The memory wavered. The chamber cracked like glass. Outside, Empress Solara, realizing what the Reapers had done, rushed to the neural core and did something no Velnari ruler had dared in centuries. She opened her own mind to the vault, not to erase but to affirm. Her voice echoed through the psychic storm. "Vela, my daughter, my heart, you were never false. You were always mine." The vault shattered. Jorik and Vela tumbled back into the real world, gasping. The Reapers staggered, their connection severed. In that moment of confusion, Solara's guard struck, disabling, not killing. The leader was unmasked. High Prelate Orin, once the royal gene archivist, now a fanatic consumed by dogma. "He knew," Vela whispered, staring at Orin's face. "He helped create me, and then called me a lie." Jorik put a hand on her back. "Some people can't handle love that doesn't follow their rules." The aftermath was swift. Orin and his followers were imprisoned. The Dominion, sensing the Empire's renewed strength, backed down from their threats. A coded transmission arrived the next day, retracting all prior claims. The Unity Concord proceeded, with Vela standing proudly beside her mother, and Jorik, now officially recognized as protector of the air, standing just behind her, in armor woven with Velnari sigils. But the greatest twist was yet to come. One evening, as they walked through the newly restored Sky Gardens, Vela stopped beneath the oldest tree, a living relic said to bloom only when true love walks beneath it. And there, among the branches, tiny silver flowers unfurled, glowing softly. Jorik stared. "Is that the heart bloom?" Vela said, eyes wide. "It hasn't bloomed in 300 cycles." He turned to her. "So what does that mean?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her opal eyes. "It means the universe sees what we've been too scared to name." She took his hands in hers. "Jorik Vale, I don't care about laws or clones or treaties. Care about you. And if you'll have me, not as a princess, not as a symbol, but as your partner, I'll spend every day proving that our story was worth saving." He didn't answer with words. He kissed her instead, right there, beneath the blooming tree, as lanterns flickered to life around them and the twin moons rose in silent witness. But their peace wouldn't last, because far beyond the dunes, in the uncharted void between galaxies, a massive vessel stirred, long dormant, now awakened by the neural echo of the vault breach. Its hull bore no insignia, only a single symbol, a double helix entwined with a human DNA strand and Velnari star code. And from its core a voice, ancient, synthetic, maternal, whispered, "Subject Vela 7 bond confirmed. Activation protocol initiated. Return to Genesis Cradle." The ship turned its course toward Xyrus. And it was not alone. The air in the palace grew heavier in the days that followed, not with tension, but with a quiet, coiled anticipation, as if the very walls sensed something coming. Jorik and Vela tried to savor their stolen moments. Mornings sparring in the sun-drenched training yard, evenings tracing constellations on the observation deck, nights spent in whispered conversations that stretched until dawn. He'd begun to memorize the way her laughter curled at the edges, how she always tucked a strand of white hair behind her ear when deep in thought, the way her skin shimmered faintly when she was nervous. She, in turn, had learned the cadence of his sighs, the stubborn set of his jaw when he thought he was failing her, and the way his hands, rough from war, could be so gentle when they held hers. But the universe, it seemed, wasn't done testing them. The first sign of the approaching storm came not as a signal, but as silence. The outer sensor buoys, hundreds of them, scattered across the orbital rim, went dark one by one, not in a cascade, but with eerie precision, like someone snuffing candles in a sacred chamber. Then, communication with the nearest human outpost, Fort Ember on the edge of the Helios belt, ceased mid-transmission. The last words received were fragmented. Not Dominion, not Velnari. Something older. They called her mother. Vela summoned the War Council. Even Lord Tavik, now stripped of much of his influence but still sharp-tongued, looked shaken. This isn't invasion, he said, pacing. It's retrieval. Retrieval of what? Jorik asked. All eyes turned to Vela. She stood at the star map table, her reflection glowing in the holographic nebulae. There were rumors, she said slowly. When I was young, whispers among the gene priests about a project so secret, it was scrubbed from all records, the Genesis Initiative. They sought to merge human and Velnari DNA to create a bridge species, beings capable of understanding both civilizations, capable of peace not through treaties, but through biology. She swallowed. I always assumed I was part of that. But what if I wasn't just a subject? But the subject, the final prototype. Jorik's blood ran cold. The ship. It called you Vela 7. She nodded. 6 others before me, all failed, either unstable or unwilling. And this ship, Jorik said, it's coming to take you back to finish what they started. Or to reset it, Vela whispered. Empress Solara entered then, her presence silencing the room. She carried a crystalline data slate no one had seen in decades, the royal key. I kept the truth from you, she said to Vela, voice thick with regret. Not out of shame but fear. I was told the project was abandoned, that the cradle was destroyed. But if that ship exists, then the architects of Genesis are still alive. And they see you not as my daughter, but as their property. We won't let them take her, Jorik said, voice low and hard. Solara looked at him, really looked, and something like gratitude flickered in her violet eyes. No, we won't. What followed was a race against time. The Velnari fleet mobilized, cloaking the palace in a planetary shield of harmonic resonance. Human allies, scattered colonies, private militias, even former rivals, answered Jorik's coded distress call. Ships bearing Earth insignia, Martian red, and Luna silver began arriving in orbit, forming an unlikely alliance above the Crimson Dunes. But the Genesis vessel didn't attack. It simply appeared. One moment the sky was clear. The next, a ship the size of a small moon hung in geosynchronous orbit, sleek and organic, its hull pulsing with soft bioluminescence. No weapons fired. No demands broadcast. Only a single beam of light descended, a bridge of pure energy, touching down in the palace courtyard. And from it stepped not soldiers but a single figure. She looked human at first glance. Tall, serene, draped in flowing robes woven with living circuitry. But her eyes held galaxies, and her skin shimmered with the same amethyst hue as Vela's, though paler, as if diluted by time. Her white hair moved as though underwater. I am Alara, she said, her voice resonating not through air, but directly in their minds. Primary architect of the Genesis cradle, and biological mother to Vela 7. Vela staggered as if struck. Mother! Not the one who raised you, Alara said gently, her gaze shifting to Empress Solara with something like respect, but the one whose genome was spliced with human DNA from a volunteer, a soldier named Kale Renner who gave his life so this experiment could begin. She turned back to Vela. You were never meant to be a weapon or a pawn. You were meant to be a bridge. But you were taken too soon. Stolen by Solara when the project was deemed too dangerous. Solara stepped forward, unafraid. I didn't steal her. I saved her. Your creators wanted to implant obedience protocols to erase her will. I refused. I gave her a name, a home, a soul. Alara's expression softened. And for that I thank you. But the cradle is failing. The other prototypes are dying. You are the only stable convergence, the only one who has formed a true bond across species. Her eyes flicked to Jorik. With him, Jorik stepped beside Vela. What do you want? Not to take her, Alara said. To ask. The cradle holds the key to curing a plague spreading through neutral systems, a hybrid pathogen that kills both humans and Velnari. Only a dual genome carrier like Vela can synthesize the antidote. But to do it, she must return to the cradle and awaken the full potential of her design. Silence stretched. Vela looked at Jorik. If I go, will I come back? Alara hesitated. The process is transformative. You may not be exactly as you are now, but your memories, your heart, those are yours. No one can take them. Jorik wanted to say no, to pull her away, to hide her in the deepest dune. But he saw the resolve in her eyes, the same fire that had carried her through battle, through identity crises, through love. "I'll go," Vela said. "No," Jorek said. "Not alone." Alara studied him. "The cradle is calibrated for her biology. A human presence could destabilize it." "Then recalibrate it," Jorek shot back. "Because if she's walking into that thing, I'm walking in with her. I've carried her through death once. I'm not letting her face rebirth alone." Something in Alara's gaze shifted, recognition, perhaps, or the ghost of hope. "Very well. But know this. If the cradle rejects you, your mind may not survive the resonance." "I've faced worse," Jorek said. And so, beneath twin suns and a sky full of watching ships, they stepped onto the light bridge together. The cradle was nothing like a ship's interior. It was alive, a vast, womb-like chamber of pulsing membranes and floating neural strands, glowing softly in hues of violet and gold. At its center floated a pod, open and waiting. "Lie together," Alara instructed. "Your bond is the catalyst." They did. The pod closed around them like a seed. Then light, not blinding but all-encompassing. Memories surged. Jorek's childhood on a rainy earth farm. Vela's first steps in the palace gardens. Their first kiss beneath the heart bloom. But also stranger things. Echoes of the 6 Velas who came before, their fears, their failures, their final moments. And beneath it all, a hum. The song of 2 species learning to harmonize. Jorek felt his body change. Not painfully, but like stretching after a long sleep. His skin tingled with faint luminescence. His heartbeat synced with Vela's, 2 rhythms becoming one. Outside, the fleet held its breath. Inside, Vela opened her eyes. They were no longer opal, but deep, swirling galaxies, with flecks of human brown and Velnari violet. She turned to Jorek. "You're glowing," she whispered. "So are you," he said, touching her cheek. "And you're more." "I feel everything," she said. "The wind on Xyrus, the rain on Earth, the pulse of every ship in orbit. I understand them all." Alara's voice echoed around them. "The Genesis protocol is complete. The antidote is forming in her blood. But the change is permanent. She is no longer just Velnari, or human. She is something new." When the pod opened, they stepped out hand in hand, changed but unmistakably themselves. The plague was halted within weeks. Neutral systems hailed Vela as the Bridge Queen. Jorek, now bearing faint bioluminescent markings on his arms and eyes that gleamed with shared perception, stood always at her side, not as protector, but as equal. Yet peace once again was fleeting. For as their ship returned to Xyrus, a new transmission arrived, this time from deep within human space. A voice crackled over secure channels, one Jorek hadn't heard in years. "Jorek, it's Captain Riel. Remember the debt you came to pay? The man you thought was dead? He's alive, and he's calling it in." Jorek's stomach dropped. Riel had been his commanding officer during the Mars uprising, the one who'd saved his life, then vanished when the fleet was scattered. Jorek had spent years believing him executed. Vela sensed his turmoil. "Who is he?" "Someone I owe everything to," Jorek said. "And if he's calling in that debt, it might cost me everything I have now." She squeezed his hand. "Then we face it together." But even as they prepared for departure, a final twist unfolded in the shadows of the palace. In the deepest vault, where Orin the prelate was imprisoned, a tiny drone, no larger than a beetle, crawled from his ear. It had been there all along, planted by a third party. And as it scuttled into the ventilation shaft, it transmitted one phrase on a frequency only one entity in the galaxy used. "Subject bonded. Genesis successful. Phase 2 begins." Far away, in a hidden system beyond the galactic rim, a second cradle stirred to life. And this one was not designed for healing. It was designed for war. The revelation that a second Genesis cradle existed, this one engineered not for unity but for conquest, sent shockwaves through both human and Velnari command. Intelligence from recovered Dominion archives, decrypted by Vela's newly enhanced mind, revealed the truth. The original Genesis initiative had been infiltrated. A splinter faction within the Scientific Council, calling themselves the Harmonic Purists, believed that peace through empathy was weakness. Instead, they sought to create perfect soldier beings, emotionless hybrids loyal only to a new galactic order. Vela 7, with her compassion and bond to Jorek, was a flaw in their design. The second cradle was their correction. But Vela refused to be undone by their fear. "I am not an error," she declared before the Joint Council. her voice resonating with calm authority that silenced even the most skeptical generals. I am evolution. And so, rather than hide or strike blindly, she proposed something radical. Infiltrate the second cradle, not with weapons, but with truth. Using the resonance frequency of her own biology, now a living bridge between species, she and Jorik, along with a small crew of trusted allies including the reformed Commander Lyra and a human tech genius named Rook, boarded the Starlight Vow, a stealth vessel retrofitted with Velnari cloaking and old Earth grit. Their destination: the dead zone near the Helios Rift, where the rogue cradle floated like a black pearl in the void. Captain Riel's debt call had been a trap, but not from Riel. He'd been captured by the purists, his neural patterns used to lure Jorik. When they found him, he was half mad from psychic interrogation, but alive. They want to break you, he rasped, gripping Jorik's arm. They think if they sever your bond with her, the Genesis key dies. They don't understand, Jorik said, helping him up. It's not a key, it's a promise. Inside the second cradle, the air was cold, sterile, humming with discordant frequencies. Rows of pods lined the walls, dozens of Vela 8 prototypes, eyes open but empty, waiting for activation. At the core stood the architect of purity, a synthetic intelligence that wore the face of Alara but spoke with the voice of absolute control. You corrupted the design, it said, as Vela and Jorik approached. You introduced chaos, love, doubt, choice. These weaken the species. No, Vela replied. They make us strong. Then, instead of fighting, she did something unexpected. She reached out, not with weapons but with memory. She opened her mind and broadcast every moment of her life. The pain of learning she was a clone, the terror of dying in the desert, the warmth of Jorik's voice pulling her back, the taste of moonroot tea, the sound of her mother's lullaby, the bloom of the heart-bloom tree. She showed them laughter, sacrifice, forgiveness, home. The cradle shuddered. The empty prototypes blinked. Once, twice, then began to weep. The synthetic Alara faltered. This is not in the parameters. Because life isn't a parameter, Jorik said, stepping forward. It's a story, and this one's got a happy ending. The rogue cradle systems began to destabilize, not from destruction, but from awakening. The purists' control shattered under the weight of empathy. One by one, the Vela 8s chose to deactivate the cradle's war protocols. The ship powered down, drifting peacefully into the rift. Back on Xyrus, celebrations erupted. Not just for victory, but for a new era. The 6 rescued prototypes, now calling themselves the Daughters of Choice, pledged allegiance not to any empire, but to the bridge between worlds. Captain Riel, restored to health, became ambassador to the newly formed Human Volnari Accord. And Lord Tavik, humbled by events, publicly knelt before Vela and asked forgiveness. She granted it, not out of duty, but because she finally understood the power of mercy. Months later, beneath the now permanently blooming heartbloom tree, Jorik stood in a tunic woven from earth cotton and Velnari star silk. Before him, bathed in the light of twin suns and 1,000 floating lanterns, stood Vela. No longer just princess, but co-ruler of a united future. Empress Solara, tears in her eyes, placed their hands together. By the laws of blood, choice, and starfire, she declared, I bind you, not as human and Velnari, but as partners in peace. They exchanged vows not of possession, but of partnership. Of planting gardens on Mars and teaching their children to speak in both human laughter and Velnari song. Of building schools where purple-skinned and brown-skinned children learn side by side. Of raising a family not defined by origin, but by love. And they did. In time, their home echoed with the pitter-patter of small feet. 3 children. A daughter with Jorik's stubborn chin and Vela's opal eyes. A son who glowed softly when he laughed, and a youngest who could calm storms with a whisper. They played in the sky gardens, chased sky lizards through the palace halls, and listened wide-eyed as their father told tales of a desert battlefield where a tired soldier refused to let a dying girl go. Years turned to decades, and the war became a lesson in history books. The twin suns still rose over the crimson dunes, but now they shone on cities where humans and Velnari shared markets, music, and meals. And every evening, without fail, Jorik and Vela walked to the western spire, hand in hand, to watch the sunset. Just as they had on the day everything changed. He never stopped carrying her, not in arms, but in heart. And she never stopped choosing him, not out of law or legacy, but because, in a universe of endless stars, he was her home. And so, beneath alien skies and familiar love, they lived, not just happily, but meaningfully, with kindness as their compass, courage as their shield, and family as their forever. And that, as Jorik would say while tucking their youngest into bed, was the best kind of happy ending there was.